We are excited to present a brand new program here on HU16 called A Conversation With. The College of Arts and Humanities at Harding is thriving. It is a privilege to work with so many talented faculty, staff, administrators, students, and alumni. And over the next year, this program will feature some of the most interesting personalities of the College of Arts and Humanities. We hope you will find our conversations uplifting, inspiring, and a whole lot of fun. Our home for this new program is the Department of Communications' recently dedicated Amy and Scott Sewell Digital Production Studio in the Reynolds Building here on Harding's campus. In just a moment, we will introduce our first guest, and I know that you are really going to enjoy him. Stay right there. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. Our first guest on A Conversation With in the College of Arts and Humanities is a man of many talents. He writes a weekly column for the Bison newspaper. He teaches in the Department of English. He's a huge supporter of Bison basketball, and he has written a book about magicians. And he is one half of Cliff and Clacks. It is a pleasure for me today to welcome to our program Dr. Michael Claxton. Thank you for being our first guest.
My pleasure.
You've been teaching at Harding since 2003.
That's right.
But you are one of the few professors on campus that didn't attend Harding. Is that right?
That's right. I went to Oglethorpe University in Atlanta.
And did your PhD at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Yes.
In the English department, you specialize in Victorian literature.
That's right.
Is that right? And
yes.
I know that we share sort of a common love for all things British.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Where did that come from?
Well, one of the great semesters of my life was going to Hugh in 2009, where I got a chance to visit many of the places that I've taught about for years, Shakespeare's home, the Lake District where Wordsworth wrote his poetry. But the inspiration for my love of British literature came from a high school teacher who taught Brit Lit and was passionate about it, and I just caught that fire from him.
Yeah. You didn't go to Harding.
I did not.
What brought you to Harding in 2003?
So when I graduated from Carolina, I was looking for a job. I was hoping to teach in a Christian school, and someone retired from the English department that semester. And I came for the interview, first time I'd set foot on campus, and I felt right at home. And I was thrilled that they hired me and have loved it ever since.
Do you have a favorite class that you teach in the English department?
World Lit is my favorite. I have a passion for introducing students who aren't necessarily going to be English majors to the joys of poetry and fiction and a little bit of literature from around the world. It's a great class.
Yeah. Going back to your love of England,
yes.
Have you been following the news with the royal family
I
over the
do
last few
keep up
weeks?
a little bit with the royal family. Always great to see a new baby. Yes.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, as an English professor, one of your favorite classes being composition,
Yeah.
You grade a lot of papers, I'm sure.
I do. I do.
My motto about that is I teach for free. They pay me to grade.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
I agree. We grade about 1,000 drafts per year, all my colleagues and I.
1,000 drafts per
Yes.
year. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have a particular method you use when you grade? Any certain color pen?
I use a blue pen. I was taught that red is traumatizing and green is too soothing.
Right.
So blue's a nice medium for me.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, not only does Dr. Claxton grade writing, he does a lot of writing on his own. And after the break, we will find out a little bit more about that. So stay with us.
Inherent right to work is one of the elemental privileges of a free people. Endowed, as our nation is, with abundant physical resources, and inspired as it should be to make those resources and opportunities available for the enjoyment of all, we approach re-employment with the real hope of finding a better answer than we have now.
Donate to Goodwill, where your donations help fund job placement and training for people in your community.
As an American, it's hard to hear that we have a serious hunger issue in our country. And as a parent, it's even harder to hear that 1 in 5 of our kids struggles with hunger, especially when billions of pounds of good food are wasted every year. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide billions of meals to families in need right in your community. Visit feedingamerica.org to support Feeding America and your local food bank. Together we can solve hunger. Together, we're Feeding America.
Welcome back. The Bison Student Newspaper is published every Friday, and Dr. Claxton's column titled Just the Clax is without question one of the most widely read articles every week. We're back here with Dr. Claxton, and tell us a little bit about the history of how you got involved writing a weekly column for the Bison Student Newspaper.
Sure. I had a student in class, Heather Browning, who was the editor that year. It was 2005, and she asked me to write a column for one issue, and she liked it, seemed to go over well. I wrote a column for the next issue, and 12, 13 years on, I've written a column for just about every issue.
How do you find time to write a column every week and grade, as you said, thousands of papers a semester? Where do you find the time to do that?
Well, I prioritize the column because I'm never happier than when I'm writing these columns. It's such a joy to me, and so sometimes I'm doing that when I should be grading. But I usually write them on the weekends, and I read them to a lunch group every Monday. And these are colleagues from the English department that help me critique my own stuff, give me ideas, catch grammar mistakes and anything like that. And then I submit them Monday afternoon, and then it's another week to look forward to something else to say.
I imagine reading your articles, a draft of them to your English colleagues, may be the most intimidating thing you do every week with that column.
Fortunately, they're really good friends, and they're very generous with laughing at the right places and all that. But yes, they have saved me from some howlers.
Now, what kind of feedback do you get every week from students, faculty, staff, alumni? As I mentioned, it really is probably the most read piece every week in the Bison. Do you have fans? Do you get fan letters?
I don't get fan letters, but I do sometimes get emails, and people will pass me in the hallway or at church and tell me how much they enjoyed a particular column, and that just warms my heart. I write to entertain myself, but if it makes other people have a good time, then I'm thrilled.
Did you write for a newspaper, a weekly publication before the Bison? Is this a new thing for you?
No, but when I was in high school, I had a dream to be a columnist. And I remember telling that to someone who said, you really need to go into something else because there's way too many people in that. So I sort of shelved that dream until I came to Harding, and then boom, I'm a columnist.
A lifelong dream fulfilled.
Yes.
Looking back over those years, what columns stand out? What are some of your favorites?
So one of my favorites is a column I wrote about my one and only episode of babysitting.
One and only.
Very
First
few
and last.
people would want me to babysit their children, but I did for a couple who had 2 kids, and it was a disaster. I mean, the kids ran wild, milk was spilled all over the kitchen floor, furniture overturned. It was awful. But the punchline was, when I finally got the boys into bed, and the older boy was saying his nighttime prayers, he went through the usual litany of praying for everybody he could think of to stall for time. And then as he wrapped it up, he says, and God bless the babysitter who doesn't know what he's doing.
It's good to be blessed that way.
Yes, indeed. I needed every bit of the blessing.
As far as you're concerned, you'll keep writing for the Bison as long as you're at Harding.
As long as the paper's in print, I'm happy to do it. I sometimes think the well's going to run dry, but stuff happens, things happen in the news, and an idea presents itself just about every week somehow.
Now I know good writers always have something in the bank. They're always ready with the next column.
Yeah.
We're done this semester with the Bison. We're looking ahead to the fall. You got some ideas? Can you give us a preview?
Yes, I went to the dentist last week, and he told me that I have receding gums. And so my first column will be about the Great Recession.
That's great. We look forward to that. Well, we certainly loved your columns, and you write weekly for the Bison, but that's not the only type of writing that you do. You've also written a book, and so we're going to talk about that next. So stay with us. We'll be back with Dr. Claxton. We'll talk about his book in just a moment.
Don't let E. coli mosh with your food. An estimated 3,000 Americans die from a foodborne illness each year. You can't see these microbes, but they might be there. So always separate raw meat from vegetables. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov.
Hardworking and dedicated.
That I had a big heart because I care about people and doing the right things.
Now, everywhere I look, I see an entire community just like that.
Learning more,
doing more,
and caring more.
A community of mission, Harding University.
Welcome back. Dr. Claxton is an English teacher. He writes a weekly column for The Bison, and he's also a published author. In 2014, Dr. Claxton published the book, Don't Fool Yourself, The Magical Life of Del O'Dell. Dr. Claxton, magic has always been something that you have been interested in. Tell us a little bit about the history of your interaction with magic.
Sure. There was a magician who came to our elementary school year after year. In fact, he's still going to that same elementary school. And I was fascinated by the tricks that he did. Just so happened that my mother got her hair done next door to a magic shop in our hometown. So I spent hours there. As it turned out, I was a terrible magician. I thought I was going to turn into something, but I'd get too nervous and I just wasn't good at sleight of hand. So I got interested in the history of magic, and particularly this woman named Del O'Dell.
And we're looking at her right there.
Yes, indeed. So she was a pioneering female magician. You tend to think of men when you think of magicians.
David Copperfield.
Exactly, exactly. And Del O'Dell started out in the circus. Her father ran a circus out of Kansas, and she learned to juggle, she learned to walk on a tightrope, and even to balance a sofa on her chin as she climbed up a 10-foot ladder. So this was a woman of unusual talents.
That's not easy.
Well, she performed in circuses and vaudeville in the 1920s, even ran her own circus for just a few years in the mid-20s, one of only 3 women in that era to run a circus. But then she got interested in magic, and around the late 20s, early 30s, started doing a slapstick comedy magic routine in vaudeville. And that led her into performing in the nightclubs. And during the 30s and 40s, she was a big success, doing magic in top clubs in New York City and Philadelphia and Chicago. And in the 50s, she came out to Los Angeles and had her own TV show, where she was nominated for an Emmy in 1952, and she lost to Betty White, who is still on television at age 96. And I got interested in Del when I had the chance to read her personal scrapbooks. She kept 9 or 10 huge books about this big, filled with clippings and photographs of her career. And when I read those around 2005, I had heard of her before, but I realized how interesting her life had been and how many different branches of show business she had been in. So I have a friend in Chicago who has a small publishing company that specializes in books on magic history. And he waited patiently as I worked about 8 years doing the research for this book. I conducted interviews. This woman died in 1962, so there are still people around who knew her or who saw her perform. So I spoke to well over 100 people who had had some contact with her. Traveled to where she was born, traveled to Los Angeles where she lived, and it was a delight. I really enjoyed doing that research. And one of the coolest things was the help I got from colleagues at Harding. If you want to write a book...
You took a sabbatical even.
I did. I was very fortunate. The university gave me a whole semester off to work on this project in 2013. And I depended constantly on people from other departments in campus. The library ordered me a certain database that gave me access to show business periodicals that told me about 10 years of her life that I knew nothing about. She briefly sold exercise equipment in the 30s, and a pioneering woman to do that.
It takes a magician to do that, doesn't
yes,
it?
it does. Yes, it does, to tell people to buy things they won't ever use. But I showed her brochure of exercise equipment to Brian Phillips from the kinesiology department, and he walked me through whether the things were practical or not. Donna Jo Miller from music played through Dell's sheet music. She sang a number of songs when she was performing in vaudeville and burlesque. And then her husband was from Switzerland. He was a juggler named Charlie Carrer. And during the 20s, before he met Dell, he traveled all over Europe performing and wrote postcards home to his mother in German, which is a language I can't read. I had those postcards, and Noble Goss in Spanish and in foreign languages was able to read them to me in English and translate them for me. So I got a lot of help from the campus.
Great. A 13-year process writing this book.
Yes.
Can we buy it?
You certainly can. It's available at the Harding Bookstore and on Amazon.
Okay, very good. We're going to take a break. Stick with us. You stick with us. While we break, why don't you go to Amazon, buy that book. Don't Fool Yourself, The Magical Life of Dell Odell. We'll be right back.
How long have we been married, dear?
For 76 years.
He was kind and generous to me before we married, and he was kind and generous to me all these years that we have been married. We had been looking at a lot of different houses in different places around that area, and when we came by this house, it was green, and I love green. I'm Irish. And so I said, oh, there's our house. I know it. We decided on Meals on Wheels because at my age, I was getting to the point where I couldn't do all the things that I had been able to do. We're the Spans. America, let's do lunch.
1 in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation. Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org.
Welcome back to A Conversation With in the College of Arts and Humanities. You can tell a great deal about a person by analyzing what's in their office, and that is certainly true for Dr. Claxton. Dr. Claxton, like a lot of faculty members, I'm sure you spend time in your office advising students, mentoring students.
Yes.
What do you love most about that?
Oh, it's one of the great pleasures of my job, talking with students, especially about their writing and helping them to develop their communication abilities, to make other people care about what they care about, which is the great task of all writers, and to do it with grace and elegance and style. So I'm happy to help them with their punctuation as well as their big ideas. And I get to know students that way, and it's a really wonderful part of my job.
Yeah. Now, when students walk into your office or colleagues walk into your office, one of the first things that they immediately see is a set of postcards, I think it is, right?
Yes. So I inherited from my parents a love for old things. They bought and sold antiques as a hobby. And one thing I collect is postcards of British authors and British royalty and people of the Victorian time period. And so I've loved hunting those down. Some of those postcards I bought at Hugh in 2009. I went to a couple of postcard shows there, and that was a real treat.
Yeah. Favorite author that you have up there? Can you pick one?
Probably Dickens is my favorite, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to read one of his novels per year in the order in which they've written. I've got one down so far.
Very good. Now, if students look long enough around in your office, they will see a lunchbox, I believe, a lunchbox that has the face of you and Dr. Cliff Gaines, who is chair of the music department.
Yes.
And, of course, the campus knows you two together collectively as Cliff and Clax, right?
Yes.
Tell us the story. What's behind Cliff and Clax? How did that all start?
That has been one of the really fun friendships I've had at Harding. I've known Dr. Gaines since I came to Harding because he co-teaches the Bible class that I go to at church. And in 2011, the SA president, Stephen Ramsey, decided to have a special program where each Saturday there would be breakfast in the dorm. The cafeteria would come to a particular dorm, set up, and serve breakfast. And he needed someone to make an announcement once a week to reveal which dorms would get the honor that week. And so he asked Dr. Gaines and I, and he came up with the name Cliff and Clacks. Not even knowing that there was Click and Clack, which was a famous radio program that dealt with auto advice. So we started doing this, and after that series was over, it just kind of took off, and other groups on campus would ask us to make an announcement on behalf of their fundraiser or some production in the music department or something like that. And we have had a marvelous time doing this.
You guys have become very good friends as a result of Cliff and Clacks.
We have indeed. And we were teasing one another even before Cliff and Clacks, so it just blends naturally into carrying on the stage.
Do you have a favorite Cliff and Clacks moment or announcement?
Well, we were once asked by the African Student Association to come to their annual program where they have a program of music and skits and costume and all this. And they said, "Can you do a skit about Africa?" And our first thought was, that's not a good idea at all. I mean, you can't make fun of an entire continent. I mean, how are you going to be funny about Africa? So we thought and we thought and we thought, and we came up with the idea that we would make fun of the fact that sometimes Americans don't know very much about Africa. So Cliff pretended to be running this travel service, and I pretended to be an Arkansas rube who wanted to go to Africa but didn't know anything about it. And so we avoided an international incident by making fun of ourselves rather than that. And it was well received.
Well done.
We had a good time.
Very good. One thing we haven't talked about yet is your love of Bison basketball.
Oh, yes.
And so we're going to do that next after the break. Stay with us.
So we were walking to school. At the corner, we waited for the traffic light.
I started thinking about lunch. Mom packed me turkey and cheese.
She's
I really
smart,
want cheese pizza,
but
like at Luigi's.
sometimes her mind
They have this
wanders.
video game there, and Kate's got the high score. We should have a sleepover. Maybe I should pack my pajamas.
I remember saying, Laura? Laura?
I think I heard Mom say something.
The sign says don't walk.
Sometimes it's so overwhelming.
When we finally got there,
she gave me a hug goodbye.
I really hope she doesn't
I
have
really
another
hope I
bad
don't
day
have
at
another
school
bad day
today.
at school today.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. That's why there's Understood.org, a free online resource for the parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Here you'll get personalized recommendations, practical tips, daily access to experts, and more. Go from misunderstanding to Understood.org.
When Dr. Claxton is not in his office grading papers or in the classroom teaching Victorian literature, or on the Benson stage giving chapel announcements as part of Cliff and Clacks, you may find him on another place around campus, and that is the Rhodes Fieldhouse, watching Bison basketball. Dr. Claxton, you are a big Bison basketball fan.
I am indeed, of both teams.
In fact, your love of Bison basketball actually led the teams to honoring you a few years ago for your fandom, right?
They were very gracious. The Lady Bison team honored me in 2012 as a fan, and the men's team honored me in 2008.
Yeah. Now, are you a sports fan generally?
This is the funny thing. I was never a sports fan. My dad played basketball, my brother played basketball. We're a sports family. But I had zero talent. I once struck out at kickball. That's how awful I was as an athlete. And so I didn't go to games. I didn't watch sports on TV. I went to UNC Chapel Hill, home of the Tar Heels. Right. Never went to a single game.
You didn't go to one game
when
at UNC Chapel Hill?
When I came to Harding, Coach Morgan was so excited about meeting somebody who was fresh off of Tar Heel country, and he was crushed to learn that I wasn't a basketball fan. But I had some of the players in class, including Matt Hall, who was a legend on the men's team. And I was so impressed with them as students that I went to a game.
Look at you there, by the way.
Well,
booing. Are you booing the refs? What's going on there?
You know, the refs don't always do what you want them to do. And so sometimes you got to get their attention and try to straighten these poor people out. But I learned from the best. The man next to me is Dr. Elliott, who is a master at telling the refs what they should be doing. Anyway, so I started going to games and got hooked big time. And so going from not being a sports fan at all to traveling to away games, it has been wonderful. I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to know the players and watching them do their thing on the court. Is awesome.
Now, have you painted your face yet and joined the Rhodes Rowdies?
I have not painted my face. I have been seen wearing one of those big furry Russian-style bison hats with the horns at Midnight Madness, but that's about as far as I've gone.
Yeah. Some favorite memories of Bison basketball. What would they be for you?
Yes. Well, one has to be the regional championship for the Lady Bisons in 2016. So much was on the line. They were going to get to go to the Elite Eight for the first time, not only in Bison history, but in conference history. And we were 1 point ahead at the very, very end. And Emporia State had the ball, they shot, and they missed. And the place fell apart. Absolutely went chaotic and pandemonium. I thought an earthquake had hit the Rhodes Fieldhouse. It was incredible.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful day to be a Bison fan.
Yeah. Those are great, great memories. We've had some really successful moments in Lady Bison basketball history, men's history, basketball history, and you've been a big part of it. And I know they have really valued your presence at the games and the way you support them.
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
Happy to do it.
One thing we haven't talked about.
Okay.
That tie.
Oh yes.
When you walked in today, you said that tie has been on television once before.
That's right. This is the
so
second
this is not
time.
Second
this
time.
This tie is on TV.
Tell us about that.
So, when I was in high school, I used to watch a TV show called Night Court.
Oh yeah.
Harry Anderson played a judge who was really quirky and who wore 1940s neckties. After World War II, people were tired of wearing khakis and uniforms. They wanted loud, flashy ties. So ties like this were in style. And Harry Anderson wore these, and I thought that was the coolest thing. So I started collecting them myself, and I wore them in high school every Friday. I'd wear a different tie, and in 4 years, never repeated the same tie. I was very proud of that. Well, a few years ago, I saw Harry Anderson perform live, doing his comedy act. And he was selling, after the show, some of the ties that he had worn on the TV show to raise money for charity.
That's great.
So I bought one, and sadly, he passed away just last week at a pretty young age. And so sort of as a tribute to him and to represent my love of ties, I'm embarrassed to say how many I have.
How many?
I have 600 ties.
600 ties
in my closet. Yes, it's a bit of a problem. I'm getting help for this, but
fantastic. What a great, great time. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
I have enjoyed it myself. Good to talk with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being our first guest on
Sure
A
thing.
Conversation with Dr. Michael Claxton. Hang with us. We'll be right back with a final word.
Sir, could you step over here, please? Is there anything you want to tell me?
Like what?
Like maybe you're out to protect the environment? Give scholarships to kids?
Fight blindness?
Help the elderly?
Feed the hungry?
Well, I only asked because you got a little lion in you. See? Right there. Right next to,
Whatever that other thing is.
From Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Thank you for joining us today for our first episode of A Conversation With. Stay tuned for our next episode when we will feature yet another intriguing personality from the College of Arts and Humanities. Until then, from all of us here at the Department of Communication, keep the conversations going.